जे कोर लोक आहेत त्यांना या मीटिंग मध्ये ठेवलंय आणि बाकी फॉर ऑल द अदर पीपल वी हॅव केप्ट युट्यूब लाईव्ह, कारण आपल्याला याची रिस्ट्रिक्शन आहे नंबर ऑफ पीपलची.
ओके, या या राईट.
लास्ट टाइम फार ओव्हर क्राउडिंग झालेलं.
हो,
जे कोर लोक आहेत त्यांना या मीटिंग मध्ये ठेवलंय आणि बाकी फॉर ऑल द अदर पीपल वी हॅव केप्ट युट्यूब लाईव्ह, कारण आपल्याला याची रिस्ट्रिक्शन आहे नंबर ऑफ पीपल. डबल झाला आवाज.
Dhruv, in that case, what happens if somebody has to ask a question?
सो माझ्या ह्याच्यावर मेसेजवर लोकांचे क्वेश्चन्स येतीलच, पण मोस्ट लाईकली पीपल विल आस्क ऑन झूम ओनली. सो whoever is on Zoom will be able to ask. Rest all we will get their questions by mail or something which can be answered later perhaps.
Okay. So it's 6:35. I think we'll wait for an.
is the screen visible?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Hi Dhruv, should we start or should we wait for another few minutes for people to join?
There was a small issue with the YouTube link, so we'll just wait for another 5 minutes. I have sent a new link
Okay.
to everybody, so people are joining.
Okay, sure.
I think Chaitanya, we will start with the introduction, and people are joining, so at least we'll not get more delayed.
Sure. So welcome everyone. to those who are seeing this live, also to those who will perhaps at a later stage view this video. We've gathered here today for a lecture by Dr. Rahul Marathe, the title of which is Insect Communication, How Insects Communicate. This lecture has been organized by Rotary's Eco-Activist Satellite Club. For a formal introduction, let me invite my fellow member, Nikhil Apte, for a brief introduction about our club and what we do.
Yeah, hello everyone, good evening. Yeah, so Rotary Eco-Activist Satellite Club is a satellite group associated with the Rotary Club of Nigadi, Pune. So the group has come together with the objective of forming a network of like-minded people who are all interested in the field of environment, ecology, sustainable development, and so on. So the group primarily intends to carry out activities like talks and interactive sessions related to nature and environmental awareness. We also do want to participate in other activities like let's say scientifically carried out plantation of native plants, or the field, any activity in the field of biodiversity conservation, or some of the group members have interests and carry out some activities in the field of, say, recycling and upscaling efforts and so on. As a group, we have already started working on, as in, so a few of the things that we have already carried out is like, we participated in the National Moth Week that happened in July 2021 this year. Or we are already working on setting up a self-sustaining kitchen garden for an orphanage in Pune. Dhruva, one of our members, delivered a couple of lectures, and so that is what we want to do. As in, we also want to interact with students on sessions, interactive sessions, and so on. So that is what we want to carry on as a group. So that's what the group is all about. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. Without wasting any more time, let me introduce you our keynote speaker today. Dr. Rahul Marathe has acquired an amalgamation of rigorous academic and industry exposure and has extensively explored a portfolio of subjects that cater to life sciences. Upon finishing his PhD in zoology from Pune University, he stepped into research, product administration, and bureaucracy interactions. He has stayed in and explored tiger reserves for 2 years. He's published more than 15 national as well as international publications, one field book, and multiple articles in local magazines. As an entomologist, which means a person who studies or is an expert in insects, in the year 2016, he channeled his vision into a proprietary firm called Mitra Kida, which revolves around research in insects with the aim to help mankind. Mitra Kida further evolved into Mitra Kida Biosolutions Private Limited in the year 2019. Dr. Rahul has also been awarded Times Men of the Year in 2018 by the Times of India Group. Various newspapers and TV channels have recognized him for the discovery of plastic-eating insects, a natural option for plastic degradation. So Dr. Rahul Marathe, welcome, and the floor is yours. You may start with your lecture.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's a wonderful, fantastic group which is doing a lot of activities in life science. So I'm really happy to hear all this, that you have done a lot of activities. So yes, today's talk is basically on the insect communication, so which is very nascent, I mean, and very unexplored, or a subject which is, first of all, insect. The moment we say insect, we only feel of killing them. But the way they are helping us out is, in a phenomenal way, they help us out. And so my job is presently, as I got introduced that in 2016, I started this small activity where initially I started doing work for farmers as an alternative of pesticide. I used beneficial insects. So, but then I found out that, yeah, there's a lot more to explore in this field of entomology, that is insects, because if you talk about the biodiversity, so you know that there's 70% of the biodiversity is insects, and which is neglected. So that's where was a trigger for me that I started, working on insects. So now I'm using insects for all possible or whatever the problem statements are. So right from like the plastic eating insect, or it could be hazardous paint waste, degradation, or the pharmaceutical waste which is generated. So all these, the problem cases, I'm using them as a solution, and rather I'm giving solution with the help of these insects. So I try to figure out as these are all insect inspired technologies where we can, really work on as a wonderful solution in the near future. So today's topic is about the insect communication. It's a very interesting topic, and I remember I gave a lecture in one of the known big name in the automobile industry, where they had invited me for delivering a lecture on insects. So that was nothing to do with automobiles and insect. So, but after my lecture, it was fantastic response which I got, that so many problems which were in front of them. So I started giving one by one solutions with the help of insects. So now then I figured out that okay, the insects, can really work in automobile industries also. So the basic was the communication which these insects have amongst themselves. So we are trying to use that as an inspired technologies and try to groom it in a much more logical way that we can use it. So today what we'll be learning is about the insects. This is a typical, what actually happens. So it's a typical language chaos. You can see a lot of, so this is our typical communication which happens. So presently also we land up in some kind of a communication error, some what's happening, that's a total chaos, because when I am speaking, if you can imagine, all of us start our mics, and you can hear a lot of sound, a lot of communication going on, vice versa, and so many things. But imagine in this whole world, these small insect guys doing excellent way of communication, and how very precisely how do they communicate with each other without any errors. There are two mosquitoes, talking to each other, but there is no error, because the one mosquito can, tell another mosquito with a buzz saying, okay, boss, come here, there's a lot of food available. That's in the form of humans, or it could be form of animals, but that's how it's, very precise and very, and in this big chaos world, they are the ones who have very excellent technology about, sending message to each other. So this is what happens, that so we think that we are the most intelligent species on this planet. So presently what we are using is very high speed of Mbps and ICO 7th generation. Now I don't know, I'm not an IT guy, but there could be 8th generation, 10th generation system, which is supposed to be the super fast systems. 4Gs, now 5Gs are coming, but still we land up in chaos. But still we land up in trouble that we cannot receive or we cannot send communication. There is error, there's a line drop, network is gone, blah, 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 blah. A lot of things happen. So you can imagine the way the things work in insect world. So we always think that we are the most intelligent species, but this is a big size of a human brain. But you can imagine this is an insect brain. You can see it's hardly few long, and this does phenomenal work of quick responses, and the way the information is stored, the way the information is given out in various forms of chemicals and forms of signals and so on, acoustics and tactile and a lot of things. We'll be dealing in one by one. So you can imagine this processor. So I call it as a microchip processor, which is hardly few mm, and a live processor, which is doing this phenomenal job. So I say it's a most intelligent species on this planet because you can see this evidence is right from more than 400 billion years before the present. These guys are very successful on this planet. So you can see the intelligence being transferred from one generation to another generation for generations. It's very successful and still the most, the most successful species on this planet. So that's the beauty of these insects. And of course, these insects are, highly neglected species. Social behavior about insects, because they have good communication between themselves, and social behavior is very much linked to the communication, because the more they communicate, they are more social. So you can see the evidence is right from the Jurassic age, when we have ants right from that era till date, without any corrections, without any too much of evolutions or anything. Same species are till date present on this planet, and they are still with us. So that's the beauty of the the species, which that goes from generations to generations. So language is the same, communication is the same till date, error free, no misfires, very precise, perfect, advanced, and etc. So we can have all these adjectives and nouns, I mean everything put together for this. But you can see there is very less of error, or rather I would say there's no error in insect communication. So you can imagine what kind of a foolproof method these guys are using, utilizing, or how they do this. Now, an action or a condition or a part of one organism that alters the behavior of another organism, that's a typical title or a definition of a communication. So if one insect is doing some kind of an acoustic noise, and another insect is responding, so there is a typical way of response these insects will have. And that's how if one insect is doing some activity or doing some act, then another insect would immediately get a good response, and they respond to each other very right. So how do these insects communicate, and why do these insects communicate? So that's one is for the recognition or the keen or the nest behavior which they have. Most of the social insects would first level, or the first the first layer of insects which will do a good way of communication is for the nest or for the togetherness. Second is for location or identifying. You can just imagine you have ants in your home. So always you may have a question that how does the ant go back to its home? How does the ant go back to its nest? You can imagine this big world, and from where and how do these insects reach their homes or the food sources, where they go to the food, then they come back to their homes, and they have a typical homing behavior, or how do they do these movements? How do they figure out? How do they come back to their sources? Then basic one more thing is, in case of the animal world, very important is the courtship and the mating behaviors. So for that also they need to do a lot of displays and a lot of communication between the species, and then they can attract the female, the male, and the female interactions. The next is the giving directions for the location of food. That's again a very important. So tomorrow, if I tell address, if I have to tell address, you go to the Deccan, you have Chitale food shop. So if I tell, we can Google it, we can reach there. But how do the insect tell each other that, okay, this is the food source? Then that's very important, the way of communication they have. Especially in case of the bees, you would find they have the typical bee dance. We'll be seeing this in details later. But there's a precise way of communication for these insects, where you have the food source. They would send the wireless message, and the message, it's more like a wireless message which has been given out. and the typical frequency which captured by all these insects. So if a beetle sends a message, wasp is not going to take it because she won't understand what it is. So it's like it's a typical hashtag kind of a system. And okay, the very particular precise species would speak to each other in their own languages. So tomorrow, if I speak in Marathi and you have a German fellow in front of me, so he's like just going to be a big question mark in front of me. So it's that way the communication happens. Next is the warning or the danger. That's very important one. Most of the bugs, or many times you'll find there are certain insects which intrude in our house. But the moment you try to touch them or something, they would give some kind of a chemical response, and that stings horrible. Or many times it happens that the bugs would give out one kind of a pheromone, which is defense pheromone, alarm pheromone, that don't come near me. So most of the insects have either chemical communication by which they are telling that don't come near me, or there's another chemical which is given telling please come to me. So it depends on what kind of interaction is being required. Accordingly, the signals are given out. One more is very important is advertisement. So like we all are in this world of advertisement. So we think a lot, we spend a lot, then we try to figure out a lot of ideas given out. So how do we market ourselves? How do we do the advertisement? So the best examples are the insects. How do they advertise themselves? Of course, we're going to see that later on. But from my studies, I feel they are the best people who do the advertisements. A lot of unique advertisements. How to make it flashy, how to make it gaudy, how to make it impactful on in this whole world, so that all other insects are also interested in understanding what kind of advertisement is in front of them. Then there's something like a thread submission, or if you have seen, there are many ants, or most of these insects you'll find once if you just try to stimulate them, they give some kind of a response. They'll give some kind of a the response in the form of a liquid, form of a chemical, or they'll directly sting you, bite you. Those are different kinds of threat expressions or the submissions given by the insects. And the last one is the deception or the mimicries. So most of the insects are known to do mimicry. So that's more related to the advertisement, and that's where the entire the insect world lays. And that's how the insects are very successful in this whole world. And till date, they are very much successful, and they're still you will find a lot of species. Of course, there's on one side we are talking about the decline in species, but on the other side there are a lot of alien species. So there's a lot of things we need to learn about the insects. But presently we are just focusing on the insect communication. So we'll be just our today's focus would be just about the communications. So the first way of communication is the tactile. So that's by touch. So when two people talk to each other, normally when you meet for the first time, what you do is you shake hands and say hi. So like this, the insects also do touch each other, and that tactile sensing gives them that, okay, he's from the same species or he's from a different species. So normally you'll find the ants would just go on tandem movement, so touching each other, or there's a typical movement they have. The moment if they find some another ant coming in their colony, and this by tactile they would understand, okay, this is not from my colony, they would immediately pounce on her and kill her. So that's how it's a very clear cut way they would they would give the response, and that's how they can find each other in their nest. Second is the chemical response. So these are called as the typical pheromones, and these chemicals are the ones which give out. The most of the insect world is dependent on the chemical responses, the ones which are given out, and there's a detector. So most of the insects have their own detectors, and they'll figure out what is the chemical coming and what is the response. So most of the insects will be dependent. There's a plant and insect interaction, and there is insect to insect interactions. So all these interactions are totally based on the chemical signals. Then you have acoustics. That is one more way they would respond to each other. That is by way of sound, and that is acoustics. And the fourth one is visual. So this is basically used for the marketing. So where you have the flashy colors or you have flashy designs, you have a beautiful way of sending some message to the keen mates or to the others, whether as I earlier told that whether you have to call the insect or you have to deter an insect, or you have to call someone or you have to deter someone, you have to scare someone, or you have to really make someone go away from the self wherever that location is. So this is something like a visual. So all these are the basic 4 ways of insect communication, and this is how they work in this whole world. And so now one by one we'll see how it works. So tactile is just a behavior like keep in touch. So that's a tandem running with both the ants and the termites. So you'll also find the termites do display this kind of activity where there's a typical tandem running, touching each other. And the very most important is the way of follow the leader. So there's one insect who is a scouting ant or the scouting termite which is going in front. So you have a chain of insects. So if you can remember in our childhood or in nursery, typically nursery, the small kids. So there's a leader in front, the teacher, and you have children going behind her. And normally you'll find that's a chain of kids touching each other. It's a big chain or a train like thing. So the same way, there's a leader in front and you have the entire worker force going behind. So it's more like a follow the leader kind of a thing. Then you have a dance which is done especially in case of honeybees, and also in some of the wasp and in some other insect beetles also you'll find that there's a typical dance they do, and especially for the social insects. But most of them, the ones who are solitary, they don't require all these things because they are solitary. They don't need any to give information to anyone. But in this case, in social insects, you need to give information to the others about the food source. Hence, the way of communication is the dance. It's a round dance or a typical way in the presence of the sun. So it's based on the sun orientation. And the typical waggle dance, so there are 3-4 type of dance which honeybees would have, and we'll find them. So now you can imagine there's a hive and there's a bee which comes back to the hive and tells that okay, this is what it is, and there's a food source, and others should know where the food source is. Then you have a blister beetle. Is a type of a beetle. The male taps the female abdomen with antennas, so she signals her receptivity. So this is basically for the mating behavior, a typical mating behavior. So only the same species insect know each other. That's how the tapping or the tactile form of communication is very very effectively conducted. So in case of ants and termites, you'll find again this is antenna tapping is one kind of so it's more like a shaking hands or more like a touch kind of a communication system. One more display you'll find in case of the whirligig beetles. Those are the typical beetles which are found in the forest waters, and if the water is pure, then only you'll find these black color beetles which you find them just moving randomly in the water. So those insects are also indicator species. So if you find those beetles, you're sure you can drink that water. If you don't find beetles in forest, in water bodies, don't drink that water. It's as that simple as that. So there is some kind of and these are indicator species. Now what happens is when these beetle want to communicate with each other, So they would have ripples in water. So these ripples would communicate with beetles, and they typically tell how many beetles are present and what is the load of beetles inside the water, and whether if there are excess beetles you need to move out, if there are less beetles, and how many are. I mean, it's a typical social colony kind of a movement they'll find. And so the communications between the ripples, more ripples is there's a danger, low ripples there is no danger, and we need to push down inside the water or come to the surface. So a lot of information is given with the help of these ripples. Then you have the tree hoppers, especially if you find in mango. So you'll have these tree hoppers found in mango. In Marathi normally they are called as turtuda. So these guys are known to produce the vibrations in the tissues. So when you have inflorescence during the months of December, Jan, right from November, you start getting the inflorescence. So these guys get attracted to the chemicals which are released, the fragrance which is released by the inflorescence. So these guys get attracted, they move to the inflorescence, then they have to breed over there for the next generation. So then you'll find they produce vibration in the tissue of the host plant, and that gives a signal to the others in the vicinity, and they start banging. It's more like, you can imagine, that's a feeder line to the overhead tank. If you bang it, you can imagine the vibrations which goes through the pipe to the overhead tanks. So it's more that way the communication is carried to the entire plant, entire tree, and all these hoppers start moving towards the where you have the beetles, or sorry, these hoppers getting congregated. So that's how they would tell each other in this. You can imagine this huge tree, and thousands of hoppers landed on the tree, but how to reach or how to get congregated in that particular area. So that's how they would communicate with each other. They produce these vibrations. This is a typical bee dance, as I told you. It's with the typical way of dance. You can see over here the bee in the center is wagging, and she's telling that, okay, the food source with the orientation of the sun outside. So that's how the bee will dance and tell others that, okay, this is almost by 90 degrees the food source is in with the response to the sun outside. So that's why the bees will work only during the daytime, and at night they don't work. So that's how the bee goes out in the search of food. When she comes back, she would tell that, okay, this is the angle, this is the orientation, and precisely the kilometer distance she can tell about the food source. So whether it is 1 kilometer, whether it is half a kilometer, so that's how rightly, as I told you, the bees are the first mathematicians on this planet. So because they know how to build the hive, the angles, and they're the typical mathematical model they will figure out. I mean, they follow that mathematical model. So this bee will now move. For example, it has to show it's 1 kilometer. So the displacement of this bee would be in few millimeters in up and down, and also the sideways wagging of the abdomen. So this will tell others that, okay, the food source is in west direction and half a kilometer or 1 kilometer. And that's how the entire team knows where to go, and that's how they will follow the entire route. And that's how they figure out the food sources. They communicate with each other about the food source. This is the whirligig beetle. Normally, you'll find them in the water bodies in forest, and they can see if you see these guys, you're for sure that you can drink this water. If you don't see these bugs in the water in the forest, don't drink that water, because it's highly, it could be some kind of a contamination in it. So these are also bioindicators, and you can see the ripples which are formed. And if it is a pleasant or no I mean, no enemy or nothing close by, you'll find them very peacefully. They'll be moving very slowly. So very less ripples are being created. But if they find any danger close by, immediately they start creating ripples, and everyone knows that there is some danger close by. The beauty of these insects is the eyesight is divided into two parts, because how it is halfway, it is outside, it's arboreal, so they need to see outside in air, and also half they have to see in water. So the beauty is the eyes are corrected for the refractive index. So the best physics example is the eyes of these beetles. So, there's a lot of mimicry or a lot of inspired technologies we can figure out using their way of living. Next is the chemical communication, which I was discussing. The chemical is very, very important part in their entire life of an insect, because 90%, or rather it's almost 90% of the way their life is based on the chemical signals. So either chemicals given out by the insect or the chemicals which they are receiving. So tomorrow, if I have an insecticide in front of me, these guys know it much, much earlier that there is some insecticide. So whether to come close by, or the moment we spray on it, they are going to die. But otherwise, they know that there is some deterrent or something is in front of us, that it is not related to us, so we don't go close to it. So well in advance they know, and they'll move from there, or something similar way to to keep away other insects. They give out certain pheromones. So these are ideally called as pheromones, and these are semiochemicals or infochemicals. So there is some kind of information being transmitted with the help of these chemicals. So the beauty of this study is we can send information in the form of chemicals. Right, so that's called as a information chemical. So ideally, I see the future of our development of the technology is we can send information with the help of chemicals also. Because presently we are using radio waves which are harming everyone, but maybe down the line, if we can figure out the way of sending messages is by infochemicals. So that can be, it's a way of a lot of research and the future. So presently, I have developed some sensors based on the insect-inspired antennas, and we are trying to figure out. So I'm working with defense also, where we are trying to figure out that I've used insects to find out explosives, and very successfully we have done some initial work. So in your homes or in your kitchen, you can imagine you just drop one sugar cube, a small sugar cube, and from a kilometer, you can figure out that this one ant comes out. She comes to that cube, she will figure out that, okay, this is the food source, and she goes back, and then you'll find there are 10 coming out. And within few minutes, the entire sugar is removed from that place, and they take it back to the nest. So now the question is, this one sugar is there in the big, huge kitchen platform, one small cube, and the ant knows it from a kilometer at least. So ant stays below the ground, it stays in below the soil, but still within few minutes, you'll find that one ant is coming there. That's the beauty of this insect. So that's the beauty of this insect world, where they can quickly check or get the chemical signals. Sorry. So that's how they know. And now, from human point of view, can you smell the same sugar cube from a distance of say 10 feet? Rather, we cannot smell it. That's the problem. We cannot smell the sugar cube which is lying on the platform, but these guys do it. So that's how the entire communication lies in case of the insects. Very precise, from a very good distance. They can figure out a lot of things from a distance. They know the food sources from a distance. They can figure out what is going to happen. Insects are totally dependent on two factors. One is the temperature and humidity. That's why they know prior that something is going to happen, is going to rain or is not going to rain for a long time. The behavior of insects can tell us what is going to happen in near future. Only thing is we need to, really understand the language, and many times insects know in advance what is going to happen. Any kind of apocalypse which is going to come, they are well aware of these features. So we can really predict the famines. We can really predict the wet floods. I mean, the floods or rains, heavy rains, moderate rains, and everything. Each and every information, earthquakes, including earthquakes, everything possible. All the disasters, these guys can very easily predict. So there's, as I told you, there's a chemical, the plant and insect interaction. There's very strong kind of a connection which insects have. So you'll find that the plants have very specific insects getting attracted. So it's more of a plant to an insect interaction. You have specific insects get attracted to only specific plants because it's like a food source for them. And hence there's a hashtag or a kind of a lock and key kind of an arrangement. So that's why there is no, now suppose you have a Y plant and you have X insect, so X insect is getting attracted to the Y plant. So you won't have Z insect getting attracted to the Y plant. So that's very important. And that's how they have a very strong signaling mechanism. And the plant is and at what stage I have to reach that plant. So that's also very important. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Clearly audible.
Okay, right. Next is the honeybees can deter the pest. So one observation which I was doing for some studies where I could figure out that honeybees, if you have honeybees in your gardens, you have very less amount of pest coming. So that's some kind of a behavior these honeybees have, because the signals which are given out by honeybees or the chemical signatures the honeybees have, that deters the pest in the gardens. So normally when you have a honeybee close by, hive somewhere close by, you won't get pest in that area. So that's some very interesting kind of observation which I've done, but I don't know. I'm just trying to get information from others also. But the way of because when you go close to the beehive, you can get a typical smell from that hive or a smell of these bees, and that particular signature is highly deterrent signature. So then there's a lot of social evolution has happened in case of Lepidopterans especially, and then in the form, the three main communication which are found in especially the Lepidopterans, and there's a typical behavior which is being observed. The alarm or the group defenses. So Lepidopteras share with other social insects include, so there's alarm especially, then there's aggregation or the group cohesion, and the third is a foraging behavior or the resource used, so that indicates the location. So these three kinds of the systems which are used, and these are the three main communication used by the social insects. And so Lepidopteras also do share this with other insects. And so that's something that's a co-evolution, or the typical social evolution in Lepidoptera has been seen. So Lepidoptera is typically the butterflies and the moths. So this is the big group again, which is equal to the beetles. And you will find this kind of an activity being, this kind of an activity especially in the Lepidopterans. So there are a few examples where you can see the beetles getting attracted. So there's a lot of research being done, and they're trying to find out that what kind of chemicals or what kind of pheromones act as a lock and key for these insects and the plant. So why only specific insects are getting attracted to that particular plant at that particular stage? So the chemical convergence between the plant and insect is one big study which presently a lot of people are doing abroad, especially in India also. So if a specific biosynthetic or any kind of a pheromone can be mimicked, so that we can keep the pest away, or you can call particular pollinators or something like that, it can be worked out. So for that, we need to really specifically identify the target metabolites which are getting generated in these plants as well as in these insects. So many times it happens that once the insect also tries to give out pheromones, which the plant is going to identify, because as you know, the plants are also live forms or living forms. So each one has a typical communication. So now this kind of a communication is between two different totally different species. It's one is a plant and one is an insect. So this kind of a communication is also very important and very interesting in case of the insect world. Then we move to the next is the acoustics. There is something very interesting, and the sound which is produced when a physical object vibrates rapidly and disturbs nearby air molecules. So that's how the information or the waves are transferred. So this all depends on the frequency, the high pitch frequency versus the low pitch, and that's how the insect world again is totally dependent on. Second is the amplitude, the loudness or the periodicity is the temporal pattern of frequencies and amplitudes. Of course, if anyone on this group is anyone with the physics background may know it very well, at how the entire physics. Now here the entire physics is utilized by the insects. The tympanic membrane. So now these insects have some kind of a membrane on the lateral side of their body, which acts as a speaker or an amplifier, just to make the sound loud. So especially if you have crickets, then you have cicada. That's a type of a bug which makes a noise, which really is a big noise, and you can hear it right almost for a kilometer. So you can imagine this few centimeters long guy can create a sound which can really reach up to kilometers. Now, a typical response of the animals to ultrasounds is between 22 to 25 kilohertz, especially the dogs and cats. Then you have 38 to 44 kilohertz for mosquitoes, fleas or house flies, spiders, and cockroaches. So you can imagine the very small range of typical, hertz, kilohertz frequencies, because these guys are, they respond to that. So then you have 52 to 60 for lizards and 20 to 72 for rats. So you can imagine that everyone has his own signature. So especially this range will be available for the mosquitoes. So it's more like a walkie-talkie or some kind of a frequencies they can catch, and they have their own triggers about how to this is a typical specific range these guys will be utilizing. The secret behind the cicada buzz, as I told you, that you can imagine there's a so small insect. So this is hardly 1 mm. If you see the section of this, you can see there are two pipes which are coming out inside. These pipes are from the inside the body, and they are connected outside to the tympanum muscle. Outside there's an organ called tympanum, so that's an amplifier, and this is a typical timbal muscle which generates that acoustic or the noise, and then that gets amplified in the sort of a typical buzz, and that's a typical kirr kind of a noise which these guys make, and to a very big extent, you can hear them for almost a kilometer. So this is the typical, you can see the cicada is in the hand, and there's a very small white patch on the lateral side below the wings. So this is the typical patch which is going to make that noise and create that big kirr kind of a sound. So that's how the insects will work. So in case of crickets, they use the wings as a mode of transmitting the sound. So normally the cricket would go and chop a single round cut inside a leaf and hold the wing in front of that cut part and then start giving out the waves or the noise, so that gets amplified. So it's a typical, way of giving, or a typical way of this acoustics, of way of communication. So you have cricket, you have so many insects which do this kind of sound producing, and they'll exchange with the help of this sound. Grasshoppers have the ears on the leg. So that's very interesting. For a typical, for humans, we have ears on the head, but grasshoppers will have ears on the legs. So that's from where they would hear the sound in the close by areas, because that's the legs which are directly, placed on the leaves or placed on the ground, from where they have to hear what the waves are coming. So in case of housefly, it's a small fly which is found inside the house, wherever a typical, the joints or the restaurants where you can see. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So that's how they the houseflies have the kind of an organ inside their legs, or the pad from which they are landing, and from where they can get the vibrations. Also, they have very good vision. So now here I can make something. If you can hear this, this is a typical cicada. If I'll try to replay this. Right, so this is a type of a cicada. This is again a typical orchestra. So when you move out of city areas and you go to the forest, you can really see this kind of a typical orchestra in the forest. So now there are more than 3-4 different kinds of insects. They're trying to communicate with each other, and that's how they would just go on giving out the information. Now see, there is one more cropping out. So you have a cricket, you have different kinds of crickets, mole crickets, then you have regular crickets, then you have cicadas, then you have, let's say orchestra. So a lot of insects being put together. Then now here you can see a typical flybuzz. I hope it is audible. Yeah, some kind of buzz, small
This
one.
one was not audible, sir.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, it's a very small one, that's why. Of course, I'll be showing a few more. Now, this is again a cicada. It's more like a aeroplane. So then this is one more cricket. So these are all different kinds of acoustics. And then we did some studies on mosquitoes. So very fantastic gossips which we could figure out. And of course, the male versus female. So of course, with due respect to all females on this group, I can share that you can typical. Now the difference in the voice you can very well recognize. So now I'll first play. There are two species of mosquitoes. The Aedes, which is a day biter, and the second, the Culex, which is a evening biter. So now we studied about these two, and our whole idea was to figure out that what is the language they are speaking. So I figured out there are more than 16 different ways they are trying to speak to us, not us, or maybe in the group. So this is how we started. So this is a single male. So this was a single male. of Aedes. Now this is a single male of a Culex. Now this is a single female of a Aedes mosquito. Now this is a single female of a Culex. You can see there are a lot of, they're trying to tell us something, or trying to tell someone else that, okay, there is some good feast over here. Please come, don't come, whatever, I don't know. But now very interesting is all Aedes males, only males. You can hear them? I hope yes.
Partially we can hear them.
Yeah. And this is all Culex male. So these are typically organized kind of a discussion having between all a group of males. But now if we go to the females, then you can see what happens.
This one is not audible, sir.
Again,
Yeah.
So only for 1 second when you click, we can hear it, then it's disappearing.
Oh, okay. I'll again,
Yeah.
yeah. Got it? No, I don't know.
Yeah, partially again, part of it.
Fine. Anyway, so these are different kinds of, voices these mosquitoes are, generating. And so we try to study them so that we can prepare some kind of an language which can be replayed, and we can tell the mosquitoes, please don't come in our area. So some kind of a communication by which we can tell them, keep them away. So that's some kind of a study or project I was doing. So during that time, I just try to get some voice recordings done to understand the language.
Can I ask a question here, or
Sorry?
maybe?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, a question I had was generally when we when we see a mosquito around, all we hear is the humming of wings, right? The typical going that
Yeah.
that is all we hear.
Yeah.
So do these mosquitoes distinguish these sounds from the humming sound of the flapping of their wings?
See, their communication is based on the humming done by that's called as a wing beat frequency.
Right.
So the mosquito identifies or communicates with each other with the help of wing beat frequency. And mosquitoes have more than 96 different kinds of sensors in their body.
Okay.
So they are the best survivors on this planet probably, because they know what the things are in front of us. And they are, of course, I don't know whether I have used that slide. So right from 50 meters, mosquito can identify the food source. That is the human food source. So it's almost, imagine you can more than 100 feet, a mosquito knows where it has to go and where the food source is. So that's how, so it has a different typical pattern of recognition, and that's how they come close to us. And why does it straight go to our ears? Normally you'll find a mosquito will reach our ears and start buzzing there. So many people have asked me this question, that why do they reach the ear and not the not other body parts initially? So it depends on the carbon dioxide emission or the active part when the body is at rest. So the first active part, which is the ears, which where the blood circulation is continuous, hence you have a lot of carbon emission at that point, and hence they get attracted there because they sense the carbon dioxide which is given out. Because when we are fast asleep or sleep, so our ears are continuously open or they're active to the sound which we try to respond to. So yeah, so then you have the next interesting part is the visual, that is the display or marketing or the beautiful way of advertising. That's all the free advertising, because many insect communicate with visual signs. They are the passive signals or the eye spots or the color patterns or a lot of things. They are all free advertising ideas, or the agents who try to tell what kind of an insect is in front, and whether it's an active signal or like a body movement or the light flashes. You can see the those worms which give out the light. Then you have the fireflies. Then you have the butterflies, which are beautiful colors. Then you have dragonflies, or there are so many. All the insect or the entire insect world, you'll find they are giving out some kind of the marketing or the advertisement that okay, I am so and so. That's basically the typical way of attracting or deterring each other in the form of this free marketing or free advertising. Then you have an eye of an insect. There's a fantastic, phenomenal, eye where it's called as a compound eye. You can see over here there are a lot of small dots. So now each dot works like an independent digital camera. So you can imagine there are 100 on one side, 100 on another side, or in some cases there are even more than 2,000, 3,000. In some flies, you can get them at most at 5,000 dots. So you can imagine there are 5,000 digital cameras clicked at one shot, and all these 5,000 images are coming back to the processing. So where you have this artificial intelligence. So presently we call it as artificial intelligence, but these guys are doing it for ages. And these all images come to the neurons, or that is the small brain, the brain which I had earlier showed you. So all these 5,000 images come there, get processed, and they know what is in front of them, especially the lens. So they also have a lens in front of them. So they place themselves, they'll hover forward or come back, they'll adjust their lens and they click the photograph. I mean, not factual, but it's just an image which is created, and it goes for the processing. So you can see, so there is no requirement of augmentation of the data and a lot of things. So all these things are done by this insect at that small level. So that's the beauty of this, and that's how they communicate. So they know what it is. The communication goes fast, and then they know whether to fly, whether to come down, whether to sit on the flower, go away, and a lot of things. You can imagine everything is done by these insects. Here, the visual displays, you can find a lot of beautiful color patterns on their body, and most of the larvae, most of the insects, most of the beetles. These guys will have so many phenomenal different kinds of the variation in colors, patterns, and so on. So it's a beautiful, it's a big platter of display in front of us with the insects. You can see visual, the beetles. There's a big, beetles are almost 30% on this insect world. So you can see so many different kinds of beautiful patterns of this, of the color patterns, the variations on the size, and you can, you go across the different orders of insects. You'll find there's a beautiful color variations. Very interesting one is the visual, that is the yellow color, what is the human see, and the same flower a bee can see white and red. So that's very interesting. So if I have to call a bee, I have to use a yellow flower so that the bees will come close to me. If I don't want to bring bees, I'll just change the color of the flower so they are not attracted. So that's the way, the signature is about the visuals. So the bee can see the same flower in white and red. So this red is basically, the landing where the bee has to land and then do the pollination. Same way, now this is white color, what we see, and this is the blue, what bee is going to see. So this is something very interesting. So most of the insects, get attracted to these specific colors and the frequencies, the wavelengths. Now here you can see the violet is what we see, the yellow is what the insect is going to see. So it's all total composite color, and that's a typical bullseye where it has to land. So that's the beautiful way of how the insect world is looking at us. I had asked you a question earlier that okay, how does an ant or how does an insect try to reach its home? Because since we know our address, we come and reach our home because we are intelligent. But what happens with these insects? So insects have an inbuilt compass to ensure that they never get lost. So that's the beauty. You can imagine the insect also has a compass inside their head. So inbuilt magnets to align themselves with the earth magnetic field. So you can imagine the termite or ant, they are all north-south oriented. So whenever you will find that the ants, they'll just move in north-south direction. So that's how they are oriented. So in some of the ants, they have found that iron oxide crystals in the insect antennas. So that's how so you can imagine that's the best way of, GPS, or how do they orient themselves towards their home. So always you'll find the termite holes, they are in north-south oriented. There was one interesting observation done with the butterflies that the most of the butterflies migrate from one place to another. So one study was done. They chopped the antennas of butterflies and they left that particular group in the entire group. So the entire butterfly did the migration except these small group. Maybe some 100,000 of them were chopped with the antenna. So this small group without antenna was disoriented because they couldn't navigate themselves. So they figured out that the antennas are used for the navigation. So you can imagine the insect antenna does the work of a GPS or does the work of an antenna. So you can see the beauty of this small creature who can navigate this entire huge planet. So this is something like a nanotechnology. Sniffer bees is a very old tradition of finding out the explosives. So, of course, in India, I am doing this for our defense forces. We are using bees and some other insects to sniff the explosives, and we are very successful in reaching and identifying explosives to parts per trillion. So that's now going to be a revolution for us, especially for the defense forces, then to figure out the explosives. So that's how we are. I mean, the insects are, their abilities can be explored at various levels. Termites are known to find gold. So in Australian region, most of the gold mine, or in African regions, they use termites to figure out where the the resources are below the soil. So now they don't require to dig rigs or bore wells and try to figure out what is there present. A lot of the cost is involved. So now what they do is they just go find the termite mound, just take those termites and get them x-rayed. So if they find these deposits in their body, the gold is present. So they start mining. That's easy. That's way of figure out what is below the soil. So that's very interesting way of finding out all these activity. I mean that's way of the communication. Which so for insects, it is a way of communication between each other, because the termite is going to sequester the non-required metal inside the body, and it tells the other colony that okay, there are certain deposits which are not required in our colony. So they would collect it, all of them go together, collect the resources in their body and keep it. Now, what we are doing as humans are just trying to explore this and try to figure out what is our requirement. So of course we are all selfish, but these guys are doing their job. Fireflies, the mystery of fireflies is always there, because many scientists have started a thing. I mean, they're working on this. So there's a pattern. So we try to do some studies on the flashing of the fly, and whether there's some kind of an information these guys are giving. So yes, they do give some kind of an information in the form of a coded message, which we need to interpret. Of course, that interpretation is very important. And what kind of interpretation? Of course, there are. If anyone interested can join me for all these activities, especially the IT guys who are interested can do this project with me, where we are trying to figure out that if we have those images, and whether some kind of a coded message is like on old times computer guys used to do that 010101 kind of a coding. So similar way, is there any kind of a message being transmitted by these guys to others? Of course, the one major image is information which is given by the flashing is about the mating. Except mating, is there any other message being transferred? Is the key to this project, or key to understand these guys. The communication is so strong in these insects, which are now we are trying to figure out or extract from the communication as the computational intelligence or the neurosciences. So that's the latest technologies, the neural network or the artificial neural networks, which are being created and studied well, so that the future, as I told you, the future is is going to be totally different. Vibration communication is one more thing that you can imagine. The insect which is below the soil, how does it tell others that okay, don't come near me or come near me? So the pupil signals deters the larval intrusion. So normally what happens is, for the insect who has a pupa inside the soil, the pupa does a typical vibration movement, so that others get a hint that there is a pupa, or there is some kind of someone is there and you are not supposed to come close to it. So that's how the pupas also do, because pupa is the one which is sedentary, it doesn't move from its place, and it is highly vulnerable for the others to come. So for example, you have a rat which is burrowing from below, and then you have the rat can sense very well that okay, there is some kind of a activity there, or other species of insect which the pupa is vulnerable to, gets an information that okay, don't come near me. So that's how that's the way of communication is very successful, and at all places you'll find they're very the communication is very precise. So we come to the end, of course, to this sessions. If you have any questions, you can have, or maybe after this also you can connect with me, or you have any questions, you can put it in chat box, or let's see. Okay, I'm open to questions now.
Yes, firstly, thank you, sir. That was extremely comprehensive. So much so that the question that I had noted down, you already answered. My question was largely in regards to, you mentioned earlier, you gave a lecture to the automotive industry. So that got me thinking, there is a field of design and engineering called biomimicry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could give us an example of biomimicry where we could perhaps take inspiration from insects and copy what they do.
Right. So one example was about the truck moving radius. So the radius of a truck, how it can be bring to the say 6 feet or something. So they used the mimicry of a larva, and they studied the larva well, and then accordingly the truck design was made. So of course there so there are so many other problems. The problem statements need to be put on the table so that we can find out some solution or the mimicries out of it. So normally of course this was about the communication. So I have not included all those slides about the
Yeah.
biomimicry. So there's architecture behind it. Then you can so in Zimbabwe, Zambia or somewhere, entire mall has been built on the mimicry of a termite mound. So you can imagine the entire. So now in most of the airports, they're trying to figure out the logic behind the crowded system used by the ants. Because the footfall is so high that it needs to be managed properly. So most of the places they're using this mimicries, the logics behind the crowding systems used in the social insects, the traffic management and all. So there are a lot of things. So what we need to do is the problems need to be put on table, and then we can really try to. So I have worked on a couple of like these kind of problems for industries. So we are trying to if we can find a good solution out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Any more questions or Yes.
Sonali ma'am wants to ask a question. So please go ahead. You can unmute and ask. Are you there? Sonali ma'am? Okay.
I think she has raised a hand, but
Yeah.
not audible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a question. So I have observed on the field that at times there are a group of wasps that lay eggs on caterpillars, so which we refer to as parasitic wasps. So I was wondering how they locate this specific host and whether they know that whether this host is healthy or not healthy and it is good to lay eggs over here. That is what my
Yeah. So as I told you that each larva is known to give out those signals. So these are in the form of in the form of chemicals, and these are typical pheromones. So the wasp knows at which larva it has to go. Once it reaches the larva, then the second is the tactile, by which the wasp knows whether this larva is healthy or it's not healthy, whether I lay the eggs there or not lay egg on this larva. So the first is the chemical signal, second is the tactile signals. And that's how it knows that, okay, this is the right larva, I have to pitch and I have to lay the eggs. So that's a lock and key. So mostly the ichneumons or ichneumonidae, that's the group of wasps which would lay eggs inside the body of another larvas or other insects also. So they're very specific about their food sources.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Something in chat box.
Yeah, she's unable to unmute herself.
I think Dhruv or Chetan, you will have to unmute her.
I'm trying to do that, but I just have the option of ask to unmute.
Okay. Sonali ma'am, you can.
Maybe you can ask the question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Seems to be some technical error.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So we are hearing about climate change, which will, the increasing temperatures. There are 2 degree or 3 degree rising. Different scenarios where temperature might increase by 2 degrees or 3 degrees. And you mentioned in the beginning that insects are very sensitive to temperature and humidity. So what will be the effect? How vulnerable are the insects to climate change? And do they adapt well to the increasing temperature?
They are more intelligent than us.
Right.
And as I rightly know, as I told you, of course, I have one more lecture plan. I normally give that lecture as insect apocalypse, because these guys are the ones who are very sensitive. And you won't believe that due to this rise in temperature, especially in agriculture, the pest is going to rise significantly. at a very phenomenal rate, because as the temperature and humidity changes, as the temperature rises, the insect is known to feed fast because it has to complete its life cycle. Because the temperature is conducive for growth, so they'll eat fast. So that's why now it is they have figured out that there are more pests on the agriculture, because they were feeding at a very phenomenal rate, because they want to complete the cycle because of the rise in temperature. So the climate change is ultimately going to impact us at the food security.
Right.
So
Wow.
of course there are so many. I mean, we have been working on this. Presently, I am also in one of the biosecurity committees of India, where we have where the UNEP has given us some task to figure out what is the next biosecurity policy. So this is one of the threats as a food security for India, because India is an agriculture country. But at the end, the climate change is going to impact us so badly that the pest is going to be rise like an at the phenomenal rate, and then you don't have any the natural predators also to take care of these pests, because they are also very running with their completing their cycles. So there's something really weird going to happen in the future. So we are trying to do some simulated studies to try to really know what is going to happen in future.
I see. It seems like a very complex and multi-layered situation.
Yeah.
Can we have, access to this talk of yours, or can we get to read it somewhere or hear it somewhere?
I have not published anywhere anything, but of course we can come out with some discussions. I'm sure about that. So those discussions can be then recorded.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think there is something in chat box. These days, often ants do not touch sugar or sweet food. Why is this? Something interesting, because of course the sugar which you are using might have more of a sulfur content, so they might have they're not trying to touch it, but of course ants diabetic nahi hai, so 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 I mean त्यांना काही diabetes झालेलं नाही, but fine. So this is if you have this kind of observation, on the lighter side, but if you're having this observation, I would be really interested in studying this, because this is something really not going with the regular phenomena. I hope I have answered it.
So there's another question: why do they prefer sweet?
Yeah. So why do they prefer sweet is see, all these insects do lot of activity, continuous movement. So they need lot of they're spending a lot of energy. So they need something sugar continuously. So normally in insect or in the ant world, you will find they catch hold of these mealybugs, or they catch hold of these aphids and take them to their nest, and they use their body sugars to take energy, to get the energy. Hence, most of the insects would feed on sugar, because they are spending a lot of energy, because they do a lot of activity. Just with the beating of wings, they are spending thousands of calories. So the amount of calories being burned needs to be pumped in back, so in the form of energy. So they need a lot of sugar. So most of the insects you'll find they are totally dependent on nectar or sugar or some of the other forms. So all these insects are totally dependent on sugar. Right. Yeah. Any more questions or yeah?
There is one question on the YouTube live. Just I'll read it out.
Right.
Yeah. So it says, is there any truth in the saying that mosquitoes prefer people with O positive blood group?
It's a very complex theory, but see, the mosquito is first of all dependent on the the body metabolites which are given out, and second is the carbon dioxide which is released, and the third is the temperature. So temperature goes common because of the 37 degrees, and carbon dioxide level is different in each human body. So the ones who are giving out a good number of carbon dioxide, so these guys are these mosquitoes get attracted to that. So that is one. And secondly, there are very specific metabolites which are given out from the human body. So these mosquitoes are very much attracted to these metabolites, and that's why very specific. Suppose two people are sitting next to each other. So one guy is getting bitten badly, and the second guy is peaceful. So it happens because that guy is giving that those typical metabolites. So as I told you, there are more than 96 odor sensors in a mosquito body, and so by which very very precisely it can figure out those the metabolites or the secretions given out by the human body in the form of sweat or any different ways. So they can very quickly figure out that okay, this is the body which I require, and they would go and land.
So I have another question in continuation. So I had been to the central forests, and all the local tribes there, they are having a kada of a local herb called chiraita. So it's a very bitter herb that you can taste. I mean, I tried one leaf and the entire day that taste was there in my mouth. So they prepare a kada of this herb and they drink it for 6 months. It's kind of a course, and they believe that after doing this course, mosquitoes don't bite you.
That's
So
what
again, is there any truth in this?
Yes, because that's what is the metabolites given out by the body in the form of sweat, and the sweat will have the deterrent metabolite, which will keep away the mosquitoes. So 6 months probably is for the total body gets contaminated. So it's very similar to a guy who is a regular alcoholic guy. And after some time, the body starts, I mean, whenever he starts sweating, you can sweat the alcohol. So it's that way. So you eat that particular plant for 6 months, and after that, you won't get mosquitoes coming back. But after 6 months, probably again, when the metabolites are dropping down, they need to again go for the same practice.
All right. Okay. No more questions on YouTube.
I think that's. I think you have moved to the end.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed this presentation. And whoever, if you have any friends who missed this presentation, so we have it on YouTube, our YouTube channel. The name of the channel is Eco Activists Pune, and you can just go there. You can subscribe, or you can see the video. And we'll be having more such presentations in future, and they will also be uploaded on the same platform. And thank you so much, Rahul sir. It was an amazing session, and we really enjoyed. And let me tell you, I have seen this presentations one, but it was equally enjoyable today, and it was equally, giving me more knowledge today. So whatever I missed last time, whatever I couldn't interpret last time, was those gaps were filled today. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So okay, thank you everybody.